Welcome back to Real Tech Talk 23. Today, we're going to bring AI. Everyone's talking about it. How is it going to change our game? We are at the forefront of discussing how AI is going to change property, PropTech, and ConTech. If you're not listening to this podcast with 7-time entrepreneurs attacking this problem today, where are you at, people?
That's why we're here, bro. This is Real Tech Talk. Boom shakalaka. So who the hell are you, bro? You know, what are you into? What do you do? Yo, you can keep it real here. Tell me about these real estate players.
Eric Brody is the managing principal of CEM VC LLC. All opinions expressed by Eric and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of CEM VC LLC. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Clients of CEM VC LLC may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast.
Welcome back, peeps. We're on episode number 23. We are chilling. We are relaxing. The studio has changed, as you can see. And that is also because we have a different format today. We're going about this podcast differently. Why? Because our subscribers are through the roof. We got sponsors now, and the budgets keep getting bigger. So today we're going to talk about something about how the game is changing. Revolutionary PropTech, not your normal PropTech. And we're going to talk about it with one of my dearest friends, one of the smartest humans that I know, that you better pronunciate his name appropriately, is Andrew Weinreich. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today to chit chat with me.
Thank you, Eric.
And you said to me, you got to make sure you have enough energy. I hope I'm bringing the energy for you.
I feel it.
Okay, good.
I think everyone on the block feels it.
Well, listen, we want the audience to know what's going on because people are actually learning here. If you recall, the premise of this whole thing is to teach our audience about some of the most complex subjects that are out there that are changing the construction and real estate game, which is a laggard, stagnant, going slower, and not moving forward with the way that times are. So today's podcast, I want to go over just a little bit about who our guest is. So Andrew Weinreich is a serial entrepreneur. What's also different about him is he came from the tech side. So we're going to hear a bit about his background, and then we better know why we have him here, what revolutionary change he is working on. So if you want to know about what's at the forefront of PropTech, technology, and real estate, you better pay attention to this podcast and pay attention to this man. So Andrew, tell us your background. Why are you here?
So, two different questions. My background is mostly serial software entrepreneur. I spent the past 25 plus years starting and building businesses I thought could be massively disruptive.
So you were like 5 when you started?
I started when I was 4. And when I was 4, the first company I launched was the very first online social network.
Wait, tell us where you went to school, because I feel like you went to some big name school. Tell us, Andrew.
I went to the University of Pennsylvania.
Wow, where the smart people go. Look at that.
And then I was, I went to Fordham Law School, and I was progressing through miserable careers. I was in investment banking for a year, and then I practiced law for 2 years. All the while thinking, what I really should be doing is starting and building businesses. And so while I was a practicing attorney, I put together a group for the purpose of coming up with ideas, and we would meet in the evenings, and we said, if we come up with an idea that we all like, we'll all quit. And if we don't all quit, then the person whose idea it was would have it to themselves. And
well, that's super kind of radical and entrepreneurial of you. I mean, that's big balls, right? To quit what you're doing where you already have investment banking and legal background. So how did it get to tech?
I was actually at a company that was on the verge of going public, and I was a lawyer there, and I quit weeks before the company went public.
A smart move. You know, we're trying to teach our audience about how smart you are.
That was the beginning of my first entrepreneurial venture.
You know, I would like the audience to know before you continue that one of the main pillars of how I got into PropTech was you. One of the main reasons that I even started paying attention to technology as it pertains to real estate was because of this man here. He's one of my godfathers and foundational elements of the reasons I got into technology.
I've loved talking about tech with you and talking about where things are going to go and what are inevitabilities. And
by the way, he means that. I've literally, at least once a week, am sitting down with you for like an hour and a half to talk about this very subject, which is like super relevant.
What's confusing sometimes is what's the path from here to the place that is the inevitability. But I do think that you can be thoughtful and imagine how industries become disrupted and what they do look like with the introduction of technology.
So give us a perspective. All right, you're in the law. So now how did that pivot to technology? Because I love your perspective. It's the tech space to real estate. So how did that work? How does that brain work?
I will fly through my background for you. I was practicing law, and the inspiration about doing something entrepreneurial was more driven by this idea that I wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to build something. Much like you build stuff, I didn't think about building something physically. I thought about making a mark and making my mark. And so the web was just taking off. This was in the 90s. And I came up with this idea that if everyone could index their relationships in a single place, you could see the people you don't know through the people you do. And
isn't that the Book of Face?
The Book of Face?
The Book Face? The Facebook?
That was way before Facebook. We were the world's largest, we were the first in the world's largest online social network. And actually, we wrote the original patent on what a social network was, which is what I just described, this process of how you index people in a single place. That notion of a Rolodex in the sky, if you will. So is the foundational element.
You are the godfather and precursor to all of our social anxieties today as a result of creating these social networks. Thank you so much, Andrew.
It's an interesting question whether social networks are a net good or a net evil today. And I think it's far from certain that they're a net good. But
so that's one. I know that was one you did. What else?
I launched what was one of the first what they call back-end operation support systems for wireless networks, Wi-Fi networks, to bring Wi-Fi to public places.
Boom. 2.
I launched what was one of the very first online SaaS solutions for political campaigns and nonprofits.
3.
We launched a mobile dating company. This is pre-Tinder. We were reverse triangulating the positions of people on their dumb phones so we could match people that were proximate to other people that they bidirectionally matched.
4.
We built from that same technology what's called a mobile CRM. We sold to IBM.
5.
And most recently a mobile analytics business. Not a mobile, a behavioral and product analytics business. We sold at the end of 2021.
My God, you stayed busy in the game, and it's like you're a serial entrepreneur. If I'm not mistaken, you also did a boot camp for people to learn technology, right?
The idea was, I obviously spent a lot of time with entrepreneurs, and the idea was that there's what I would call sort of a threshold level of competency you need in every discipline. So in order to be a successful entrepreneur, meaning you don't need to become a programmer, but if you don't conceptually understand how programming works, you can't say, I'm the most genius marketer and I'm going to completely delegate that. Or I'm the most genius programmer.
By the way, we talk about it in development all the time.
I don't understand how financing works. There needs to be a minimum level of, so I had a couple hundred CEOs, entrepreneurs come through a program I offered, which was as much an opportunity for me as it was for them. Staying smart is hard. And so there's something incredibly invigorating about deep dives with different people on what they're doing and sort of imparting in them the wisdom of what you need to be a successful entrepreneur, but learning from them where are the areas that they're diving into.
What is that? Iron sharpens iron. I completely agree. So that's why, and I wanted the audience to understand why it is so relevant that you are here. So now, with all this skill set and thinking about businesses and getting them built and sold and executed, what then made you so fascinated with the PropTech space and then lay out where you're headed today?
So if you look at, let me answer that in 2 parts. Why am I interested in PropTech?
Why did your eye go from wherever it was looking in technology and making that application now to this space?
Yeah. Generally speaking, I like to dive deep in areas that I think represent world impactful problems. What's a world impactful problem? It's an area where there's definable inefficiencies that affect lots and lots of people, And the way I'm defining these world impactful problems that I like to dive deep into, it's where technology or some type of innovative process can fundamentally, for the better, change the experience of either individuals or businesses. Now, what excites me about the real estate development?
No. So that was the premise question, right?
Well, that was
it. That was your high level understanding. Then what?
That's high level of my perspective on what's exciting to research in the world.
Right.
But when you think about world problems, there is a massive shortage of housing. Massive global shortage of housing. There are millions of units that this country needs, let alone, I heard a talk by a former Google entrepreneur, let alone that the world needs. Well, I heard a talk several years back by an employee of Google who said in order to satisfy the housing needs of the growing population by 2050, we need to build the equivalent of a San Francisco in housing every day, 365 days a year, for the next 30 years to satisfy housing needs. And so the question is, why can't we do that? Why in this country do we not build sufficient number of housing for people?
And I feel like for you, that like literally would probably keep you up all night.
Well, the answer is so fundamental and so obvious that it's too expensive to build. If it was less expensive to build, or if it was more profitable for people to build all types of housing, we'd have more housing.
Okay.
So then the question becomes...
And we talk about that all the time, about these inefficiencies, and even bring on companies that are trying to create efficiencies in order to make it less expensive to then achieve this massive goal that you have.
Right. So if we start with the assumption that the problem is it's too expensive, if it was less expensive, there'd be more housing, then we try to deconstruct, well, why is it so expensive? And we try to deconstruct that from two perspectives. One, we could literally go through, well, where is cost allocated in construction? But even before we get there, where is cost allocated in construction? The first thing we realize is there are attributes of this industry that are positively unique. Mm-hmm. So the level of, or the lack of integration for most construction stands out amongst other verticals. What do I mean by that? I looked at the top 100 builders of single-family residence in the United States. And they only represent, if you add up everything they build, a little less than 40% of construction of single-family residences, which means that the majority is done by mom and pop folks. And we know how the majority is done. We know that there's
a book by this guy, Barry LePatner, about broken buildings, busted budgets, talking about why it doesn't get consolidated to the best. Like, why isn't the best building all the homes right now? If 60% is still mom and pops, like, I get it. I agree with you. What you're saying is, and we're building slower, construction is fucked up, and we need these homes.
By the way, it's not just that they're mom and pops. It's that a mom and pop who's building has a contractor and subcontractors that are not vertically integrated. And so all of the pieces are not vertically integrated.
Nothing is scaled.
Right. So
and by the way, we see that in multifamily development and construction in New York City, in any major city. The same thing happens. How about this as a problem? The experience and understanding of that contractor dies when they relieve the business. Nobody is continuing to learn to get more efficient.
Right.
It's relearning the wheel every single time.
Right. So I think the answer is pretty straightforward about why construction is unique amongst every vertical. I can't think of another vertical that's bespoke. Completely bespoke.
Right.
You build a car and it rolls off a factory in California or in China for that matter, and it drives the same in Texas as it does in New York, right? It's fundamentally the same car.
We talk about all the time, and it's me and you talk about all the time, that it's a complex business, not a complicated one, which is just what you're saying.
Well, it's the context of every single thing you build is based on where you're building it. And so because the grading of a space may be different, the zoning of a space may be different, the availability of materials may be different, the availability of labor may be different, the design is different. By the way, it doesn't have to be, but because it is, because everyone starts from scratch and because everything is bespoke, the problems of bespoke cascade throughout the entire process of building.
Correct.
So that is incredibly curious, right? You have to ask yourself, is there a way where somehow or another you are not dependent upon the cognitive labor? The cognitive labor, let's just be
People's
clear.
brains.
Right. And the cognitive labor, by the way, is not just the architect, right? Because the architect designs, the GC redesigns, downstream, you have trades that create mechanical drawings, electric drawings,
And their
plumbing
experiences
drawings.
are different with attachment details and on and on.
Cognitive-
Constantly bespoke, I think, was a perfect way of describing it.
Cognitive work extends even to procurement, right? Cognitive work extends to logistics. And so in the context of
So it's service all the way through.
It's everything other than labor. It's service work. It's the professional work. Even the trades are doing some professional work.
And you're saying under that paradigm, we could never achieve this goal of all the housing that we need.
Well, the way you would do it in the aerospace industry, or the way you would do it in the automotive industry, is you would essentially design everything up front. You'd have a single source of truth. If you didn't design it up front, you'd still have a single repository of truth. And then everyone's work would be a contribution to that single source of truth.
Is that really how it works? So they're kind of working together to be better and better?
Well, it's the equivalent of what you and I described as, it is not 3D BIM, 4D BIM, 5D BIM, 6D BIM, 7D BIM. It's the equivalent of the most extreme BIM level that you would try as best as possible to consolidate truth in a single repository. Now, real-time supply chains may mean that there's certain information you need to provide downstream. But essentially, that's what you're aspiring to in every industry. It doesn't exist at all.
I have this theory, and we talk about it all the time, about what the future, because I just want my audience to kind of understand. When an architect designs a plan, he draws a line, right?
Yep.
That line represents a material, but it doesn't mean that material manufacturing speaks to whatever that dimension was. So whatever they're designing one day, like you said, it goes downstream, cognitive to the subcontractor, and the contractor are having to actually achieve the goal of what an architect just drew. And what I'm trying to understand, or what I believe you're trying to state, is that when you drew that line, it would actually represent a specific manufacturing process that line actually represented in the real world, a material that could be procured and delivered to the site right from the drawing.
That it was available and that the labor was familiar with the implementation of that line that you were drawing. That's right. And that it was consistent with the logistical model that you put together. That's right.
Guys, if you need creative agencies and digital marketing out there for you, come to the #1 company that I know, the one that I use and trust, called Snap Listings. They represent PropTech and ConTech companies currently in the ecosystem, and they're looking for a few more. So if you're interested, then my sponsor, Snap Listings. Pay attention. So this podcast always talks about this problem, and we're looking at everyone attacking it. Now we have one of the smartest peoples that we've now seen in my universe, I'm not saying in the universe, now looking at that problem. So now you've identified the problem, of which we agree with. That's the basic premise of this podcast. So now what is your thesis? How are you attacking this problem?
Well, let's stay high level for a second, and then we'll talk about, because I think there are two ways you would attack this problem. One way you would attack this problem.
And then I want to know how you're attacking it.
Well, it'll be one of the two.
Oh,
so
look at that.
So one of the ways you would attack this problem is you would try to identify commonalities in context. And then you would say, I'm only putting up the same thing in the same context. You would actually look for property that had the same grading, that it was the same sensibility about what you would design. It was the same sensibility about the budget you would deploy. And you would,
so to the layperson, because look, most of us, when we're doing, let's say, single family home builder or multifamily home builder, there's some parametric like design, like 50 by 100 lot, or, a certain amount of lot.
If you were a developer,
right,
and you found a lot in upstate New York and put up a home, you would, first of all, if you were a large developer, you'd buy a tract and you'd subdivide it and you'd come up with two models, and you would basically switch the orientation and put up 100 homes of one model A and 100 homes of model B.
And those contractors only get better by the time they get to the 50th home. Now they're rolling.
And their price and their cost to build is substantially better than the cost of someone putting up one home. Right.
And this happens, though.
We know this happens.
We know
right?
this happens.
But one way this problem is partially solved, not the area that we're about to talk about, it is even if you put up a single home, you would look for other areas where it was appropriate to put up a single home. If you weren't a developer that could buy a huge tract and subdivide it, you neither had the capital, the resources, or the time, you would still say, I have a library here. I did something. And to the extent I could do this exact same thing somewhere else, this notion that the buyer of the home is going to care that 50 miles to the north is the exact same home is ridiculous. Like,
Right.
you should be putting up the same home in as many places as possible.
And people have done that. We know Lennar or Toll Brothers. They are doing
Lennar
that,
and Toll
right?
Brothers is more about you buy the track and you subdivide, right? What we're talking about is mom and pops that instead of looking to customize each instance, they would be doing the same thing over. Yes, that's done. Your question is, where do I think is the more interesting?
Yeah, where's
area to
the
play?
new-ish? That obviously hasn't solved the problem that you've identified.
Right. So I think the more interesting area to focus on relates to artificial intelligence, which is all the rage today. And
Wait, full stop. So now what you're saying is maybe the solution to the world's housing crisis lies in artificial intelligence.
yes.
Now you got me focused. Tell me how.
So let's just talk about what AI is doing in other verticals.
Let's talk about what AI is. Why don't you give us a quick rundown of what AI even means?
So what's exciting are these large language models that have essentially
ChatGPT?
ChatGPT, now
Not sure I've written an email in months.
now Bard, right? These ideas that
Bing.
Microsoft is using ChatGPT.
Okay.
But the idea of these large language models, they've ingested massive amounts of data. And you can almost think about it like based on a query and based on analyzing billions and billions of points of data, they're able to predict the logical conclusion to a thought. So they're forming.
So it's almost like when you do Gmail and it ends the sentence for you, right?
It's almost like
it's you have to drive a ton of data, and within that, there's even if it's this massive permutation, you can define close to what it specifically could be the answer or the response.
Yes. And when you ask that question to ChatGPT or to any large language model, your question, inherent in your question, can be additional information that you would provide. So, for example, this is how I would envision it working in the future. For example, you can say to a large language model, what design makes the most sense for this lot subject to these other considerations? And then you would enunciate them. What are the other considerations? Here are the permitting characteristics. Here's the soil. Here's the
zoning, the building code, the types of materials you want to use,
budget.
right?
Here's the design sensibilities of the neighborhood, right? And you would expect that if you could include that data, those parameters, that eventually AI will replace the work of an architect. Mm-hmm. Now, how far does that go?
Yeah.
Can AI replace the work of a structural engineer? Yes. A mechanical engineer? Yes. Electric, plumbing? Yes. And if you're able to ingest those different sources of data, you would expect that the output was cognizant of other parameters, availability of labor, availability of materials. Will one company accomplish this? Will one company come out? Will a startup come out or an established company come out and say, we figured out how to solve?
Wait, but that solves professionals, right? So what you've just stated is it solves for the professional side. The other inputs you're saying are starting to solve for other issues. So the other one you described is a supply issue, meaning somehow you've aggregated enough data on the world's supply to know what's available for this permutation that you've now typed into ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So you're now solving a supply. We said professional.
I mean, what's interesting about the supply is that it's framed as a separate issue. It's not a separate issue. Like supply is one of the parameters for what you should design.
And I feel like the audience should really understand when an architect designs something, when I get to actually supplying something, that could be anywhere from a year to 2 years away. So sometimes the model's done, right? Like you need to reiterate this information all the time, right? You spec something. That does not mean when I go to buy it, it exists.
But part of the problem is construction takes part of the cost associated with construction is time. And if you can condense time, you have solved a couple problems. One, greater predictability that when you actually go to purchase something, it is what you spec'd it at. And then the downstream consequences of building in a shorter time frame are your opportunity cost, right? If you are if it's a cash flow generating property, you're monetizing it sooner. If you intend to flip it, you can flip it. So there's the idea here is how much of the cognitive labor, including we're going to talk about the role of the scheduling and the procurement. How much of the cognitive labor can you front end and then completely disrupt with AI? And my answer to that is all of it. Now, not all of it.
But you haven't. So okay.
Not all of it tomorrow. And by the way, not all of it with one company. Like what you will see is an ecosystem where many players work together towards that disruption. Now, does that disruption 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? We will see incremental progress. But if you want to think about where to play, it's helpful to imagine the end state and then work your way back. And one of the things that's incredibly challenging is to associate a date with the end state. So
let's just go back for a second. So I get it. I think that's pretty clear, right? Anything you ever need and you're worried about variability, making calls, having to search the internet, resolved for you a single document that you know is clear and accurate. You're not saying, though, people still will have to actually build. AI is not going to replace the contractor.
No.
It may replace what they need to achieve that day. Could you imagine on a critical path method based on ChatGPT or some type of AI telling you, today you have to finish X amount of linear feet in order to achieve the goal of building this building in 5 months?
Yeah.
Done.
That's right.
So if you're late on that, you could type it back in and it can tell you what the delay is based on just aggregating so much data at any moment. To me, I agree with you. That does seem quite feasible.
The funny thing about AI is for years, we've been telling kids that the name of the game is study to be an engineer, study to be a software engineer. Well, one of the professions that will get disintermediated the fastest is actually software engineering. And this notion of cognitive labor versus manual labor, how, the expectation is, you've got to be focused on cognitive labor,
that's where the big money is, right?
Accountant, be a banker, be an architect. That's where the big money is. Be a radiologist. And we know now that AI does a better job of analyzing mammograms than radiologists. The irony of all of this is that it's the cognitive labor that's going to lose their jobs first. And it's the manual labor. There may be separate solutions for improving productivity of manual labor, right? It may be that robots have a significant role to play in the future. But the number one way you would improve manual labor in the construction space is you would perfect the logistics, meaning the scheduling, and you would take away from the manual labor the idea that they need to implement plans on top of the architectural or construction plans.
Yeah.
That would all live.
Sketches, SDs, as-builts, and all the rest of it.
Right.
No, not necessarily.
That would all live in this, what I'm calling single source of truth.
So, fine. Now, you being the serial entrepreneur that you are, how are you going to attack that problem and change the game? Where do you see yourself now creating a business around that?
So I don't see myself creating a business around that. I see myself, I'm excited about investing in companies that play some role in that future ecosystem. Like what excites me is imagining how the world will be and then looking for entrepreneurs that are aligned in the same vision that I have, maybe not exact, but view themselves as playing some important piece in getting us from here to there. Now,
so
that
that's
doesn't mean
listen, that's fascinating, right? Because what you're stating is instead of being the one to start that business, you're interested in investing into those businesses. But you also said you didn't know if it was 5, 10, or 20 years away. So how are you going to find those entrepreneurs who are thinking like you currently today to drive to you to communicate about what they're doing so that you can assist them? Like, how are you going to bring in that funnel?
How am I going to bring in the companies?
Yeah, why are they going to talk to you? How are you going to get them in?
Well, one way I'm going to get them in, Eric, is with you.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. So are we calling all AI entrepreneurs right now? If you're thinking the way that Andrew is, you better reach out to RTT. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think we're interested in speaking to anybody who has this idea that they can do one of two things. They can either disintermediate professionals or shrink the work that they have to do. So it's, you're always going to need architects to stamp the drawings. And in the short term, you can almost think of AI as complementing architectural work.
For now.
For now.
Can I tell you something though? Today, I'm on the phone, an architect, right? An architect created, and there's a few out there, a model for automating the underwriting and zoning process in the city of New York. There's one in Miami where they're taking any, density, air rights, and trying to basically design in a building envelope and then tell you what the gross square footage is, the net, and the floor area immediately, right? Which is just what you're saying, taking that cognitive masturbation that architects have to do and underwriting every single lot that you call and ask them for, and saying, no, we can kind of already plug that all in this massive single source of truth that will underwrite any lot in New York today. And it's architects that are designing it and saying, we'll jam in the information for it to get automated.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. The two pieces. One, how do you make cognitive labor's work shorter or disintermediate the cognitive labor? And then two, how do you imbue in this source of truth sufficient knowledge that you can be responsible for either procuring materials or scheduling with the subcontractors and providing instruction sets for the work they have to do? That's what I would call the broad framework of what we've been talking that's interesting. And, it sounds...
And we're seeing it. We are seeing people dabble in it. This moment that you're talking about right now, especially with ChatGPT coming out, is super relevant because maybe that is the future of looking at construction, PropTech, and development that we've been all searching for, where everyone else was looking at multifamily, sensors in the field. And now you're like, no, the solution is in changing and disrupting just what you said, cognitive, right? It doesn't have to be that what we're describing is in lieu of robotics or in lieu of prefab or in lieu of modular. We're identifying a very, very specific problem, which is the fact that the people that put their hands on drawings or that put their hands on plans slow the process. That's what we're putting our fingers on. And we're saying if you have computers or algorithms that can do the thinking, can essentially write the plans, and use that word plan very expansively. The plan for the drawing, the plan for the construction, the plan for the execution of the development,
the plan for the execution. We're saying if you can use a computer or an algorithm to do that work, you can shrink time. It's a very simple proposition.
And it's been proven in language, right? That's what you're saying. It's been proven in language.
It's been proven in language. And what's interesting about PropTech, candidly, is it's really easy for people to see how you have a law firm today that's got 4,000 attorneys. And it's really easy to see how at some point in the future, they're going to have 300 attorneys and do the same work, right? That's easy to see. And it's easy to see how in accounting, same concept, right? Like the work of many people will be done by a fraction of those people because it'll be automated. It's harder to see in construction. And the reason it's harder to see in construction is because we view all of these planning tasks as discrete. We don't think of them as discrete people in the context of a single family home. In a large development project, multifamily large development project, we do think in terms of, someone's in charge of procurement, someone's in charge of logistical modeling, someone's in charge of architectural design, someone's in charge of all of this planning. In a smaller context, we just think these are tasks that happen along the way, and we just associate a time frame with building a home. It takes 2 years. And we don't really say, well, how does that take 9 months? Like, how do we do that?
Now you're starting to talk like Elon Musk.
Well, I think
maybe we got the Elon Musk of construction here right now.
I think that's, you start by aspiring to something, right? You say, we can't reinvent everything, but if everyone just did their job without any question as to what their job was, right? So that means that there's a clear sense of when you do it and what the instruction set is that you're doing.
Right.
And those things that you don't need to do, whether it's sketches, trade drawings, procurement, those are taken off your plate. So everyone just does what is absolutely necessary. Then you begin to think, would that be enough to cut the time by a third, in half? by 60%. I don't know how much, but we should have dramatic aspirations about shrinking time before we even think about how everything in the world is made in a factory, which, by the way, may happen. And this would complement that as well. But
listen, I think you and I could talk about this for the next 10 hours, and this is probably the least I've ever spoken in one of our podcasts because I agree and I am fascinated. So I think that this is the future. I'm super interested in seeing who does reach out to you and I about how they're using this AI. And I just want to thank you for, I think, sparking a debate that needs to be discussed that I'm not hearing about how we take something on ChatGPT that you and I have just downloaded and apply that to some of these industries that are not getting better. And I believe that will disrupt. So I just want to thank you for coming on, AW. I really appreciate you. And you're one of the smartest people I know in the game. And if you're not paying attention to this podcast, you're missing out on the changing narrative that I guarantee you and I will be on the forefront. And I'm going to be on the forefront because of you.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, brother, man. Guys, in conclusion, I hope I was clear. If you're out there and you're incorporating AI or you're thinking of how you're going to aggregate data to mitigate and reduce the construction and development process, we are here to hear from you. So you got to reach out. You got to let me know. Find me on Insta. Find me on YouTube. Find me on Spotify. Hit me up. I want to talk to you about it. We're in this game to get paid and make magic happen with you. So reach out to us. Oh, by the way, did I tell you we got the #1 PropTech podcast in America? You want to be down with the big man? You better say what's up in the field. I'm not getting enough what's ups.